The plane lurched to a sudden stop so hard that champagne sloshed over crystal rims, and a woman screamed from somewhere behind first class. The tug outside groaned, brakes screamed, and the calm voice from the cockpit never came. Not yet. In seat 2A, the boy didn't move. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, water dripping from the sleeve of his jacket onto the carpet like a ticking clock. Someone had just shouted that he didn't belong there. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 had been built for people who were used to silence obeying them. Retired executives, with shoulders softened by age, but not by humility. Couples who had buried parents, raised children, paid mortgages, and believed the world made sense if you followed the rules long enough. Leather seats breathed quietly. Overhead bins shut with the sound of money being protected. Everything smelled faintly of citrus wipes and old cologne. Marcus Reed was 19 years old and sat among them like a dropped match. He looked young. That was the problem. Slim frame, short hair, plain jacket zipped halfway up. No cufflinks. No watch anyone could see. A backpack under the seat, scuffed at the corners. He had boarded early, nodded politely, said thank you when the flight attendant offered water. He hadn't drawn attention. He never did. He had learned early that attention was expensive. Across the aisle, Evelyn Harper leaned forward in her seat, spine stiff, lips pressed into a thin, practiced smile. 62 years old, decades in logistics. A woman who had negotiated contracts in rooms full of men who called her honey until she taught them not to. She had flown first class since Marcus was in grade school. To her, that space meant order. Earned order. And now there was a kid in it. "I'm just asking a simple question," Evelyn said, her voice loud enough to travel but careful not to sound rude. "Are you sure you're in the right seat, sweetheart?" The word sweetheart landed wrong. It always did. Marcus didn't answer. He kept his eyes forward, the window showing nothing but nightlights smeared across the tarmac. His fingers curled slowly against his thigh. He counted his breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't escalate. Don't give them what they're waiting for. Evelyn exhaled sharply. She hated being ignored. In her world, silence was something you imposed, not something you received. A man in the row ahead turned halfway around. White hair, wedding ring worn thin. "Everything okay back there?" he asked, already tired. Evelyn smiled at him, the kind of smile that meant she wanted him on her side. "Oh, I'm fine. I just don't feel comfortable when airlines stop checking who belongs where. Security's not what it used to be." The word security hummed in the air. Marcus felt it like a pulse. The flight attendant, Sarah Collins, paused 2 rows away. Late 40s, tired eyes. She had flown through 3 airline bankruptcies and 1 divorce. She had learned to read trouble before it stood up. Her gaze flicked from Evelyn's tight posture to Marcus's stillness. Something was wrong here, but not in the way Evelyn wanted. "Ma'am," Sarah said carefully, "everyone in this cabin has been cleared." Evelyn tilted her head. "I'm sure, but mistakes happen. You see it on the news all the time." Marcus swallowed. He tasted metal. The plane began to push back. The engines rose in pitch. Outside, ground crew lights streaked past the window. This should have been the end of it. It never was. Evelyn reached for her glass, missed slightly, and corrected with irritation. She took a sip, eyes never leaving Marcus. "Kids these days," she muttered, not quiet enough. "No sense of place." Marcus finally turned. His eyes met hers. Calm, controlled, older than 19 had any right to be. "I'm fine where I am," he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't disrespectful. That made it worse. Evelyn's smile vanished. Something brittle replaced it. "Don't get smart with me," she snapped. "I've worked my whole life to sit here." Marcus held her gaze for a beat longer than polite. Then he looked away. The water came next. Quick. Sharp. A flick of the wrist powered by humiliation, not strength. It splashed across his sleeve and chest, darkening the fabric, cold soaking through to skin. A gasp rippled down the cabin. For half a second, no one breathed. Sarah moved instantly. "Ma'am, that is not acceptable." Evelyn's voice shook now. "He made me feel unsafe." Marcus didn't stand. He didn't shout. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open, water dripping onto the carpet. "I didn't touch you," he said. The words felt small in a space that suddenly felt enormous. From the cockpit, a light flashed. The engines dropped to idle. The tug outside stopped pulling. Up front, Captain William Harris removed his hand from the throttle and listened. 58 years old, former Air Force. He had landed planes in sandstorms and once over the Atlantic with an engine on fire. He did not like surprises on the ground. "Hold," he said to his first officer. "Something's off." The interphone crackled. Sarah's voice came through, tight but steady. "Captain, we have a passenger disturbance in first class. Possible assault." Harris closed his eyes for half a second. Then he set the parking brake. Back in the cabin, murmurs grew louder. A woman whispered that this was ridiculous. A man muttered about missing connections. Someone else said the kid should have just moved. Marcus sat very still. He could feel eyes on him from every angle. Judgment, curiosity, relief that it wasn't them. Evelyn crossed her arms, shaking now, anger and fear colliding. She had never imagined this would go this far. In her mind, she was restoring order. That was what people like her did. The plane jolted as the brakes engaged fully. The motion was unmistakable. Not a delay, not a pause, a stop. Heads snapped up, glasses rattled. Somewhere in economy, a baby began to cry. Marcus closed his eyes, not in relief, in resolve. He had known this would happen the moment he stepped onto the jet bridge. The stares, the silence, the assumptions. He had chosen the seat anyway, because some things were worth the cost. In the cockpit, Captain Harris picked up the microphone, his voice low and controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are pausing our departure due to a situation that requires immediate attention. Please remain seated." The word situation carried weight. Sarah stepped closer to Marcus, her body angling slightly in front of him without making a show of it. Her hand hovered near the interphone again. Evelyn looked around, finally sensing that something had slipped beyond her control. "This is unbelievable," she said. "I did nothing wrong." Marcus opened his eyes. They were steady, clear, not angry. The camera, if there had been one, would have pulled back then. Wide shot. Leather seats. Older faces. A teenager soaked in silence. A plane frozen between motion and consequence. No one yet knew who Marcus Reed really was. But the plane had stopped for him, and it was only the beginning. The cabin didn't erupt. It tightened, like a room holding its breath after a verdict that hadn't been spoken yet. The engines stayed low, a constant growl under everything, and that sound made people uneasy. Machines weren't supposed to hesitate. People did that. Captain Harris stepped out of the cockpit with slow, deliberate steps. His uniform was crisp, shoulders squared, face carved by years of decisions that couldn't be undone once spoken. He didn't look at Marcus first. He looked at the floor, at the wet patch spreading into the carpet fibers, at the glass still clutched in Evelyn Harper's hand, trembling now, her knuckles pale. "What happened?" he said. Not loud, not soft, flat. The voice of a man who had learned that tone controlled rooms faster than volume ever could. Evelyn stood halfway, already rehearsing the version of herself she preferred. "Captain, I was threatened," she said. "I asked for help. This young man became aggressive." Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't correct her. He knew better. Truth didn't need to rush. It had time now. Sarah spoke before Harris asked again. "Sir, the passenger in 2B threw water on the passenger in 2A after a verbal confrontation. I witnessed it. So did others." Harris nodded once. He turned slightly, addressing the cabin without turning it into a performance. "I need statements. Short. Clear." The man with the wedding ring leaned out into the aisle. His voice wavered, but not with fear, with discomfort. "She kept questioning him," he said, "about his seat, about security. He didn't say much at all." A woman 2 rows back added quietly, "I saw the whole thing. He didn't touch her." Evelyn's mouth opened, then closed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. People like her didn't get outvoted in rooms like this. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I've flown longer than he's been alive. I know when something's off." Harris finally looked at Marcus. Up close, the boy looked younger. Wet jacket, hands folded, face controlled in a way that didn't belong to someone who hadn't lived long enough to be tired. Harris had seen that look before. In recruits who learned early that reacting cost more than it paid. "Son," Harris said, "did you touch her?" "No, sir," Marcus replied. "Did you threaten her?" "No, sir." "Did you raise your voice?" "No, sir." Harris studied him for a beat longer than necessary. Then he turned back to Evelyn. "Ma'am, you are being asked to remain seated while we resolve this." Evelyn laughed, sharp and brittle. "Resolve this? How exactly?" "Because I'm the one who feels unsafe." Harris didn't blink. "You're the one who initiated physical contact." "That was nothing," she said. "A splash of water." People are too sensitive now. Sensitive. The word drifted through the cabin like smoke. Harris straightened. "Ma'am, assault doesn't become acceptable because it's small." That landed. Harder than the brakes had. Evelyn sank back into her seat, color draining from her face. She hadn't expected that tone, that judgment. Harris turned to Sarah. "Call ground. I want airport police." A murmur rippled forward from economy. Word traveled fast in metal tubes. Phones came out quietly, screens glowing low. Not filming yet. Watching. Marcus stared at the back of the seat in front of him. His pulse had finally started to show itself. A steady thud behind his ribs. He thought of his mother, of her rules. Keep your hands visible. Keep your voice calm. Let the system show itself. Sarah leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Are you okay?" Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated. "I'm sorry." He met her eyes. For the first time, something flickered there. Not gratitude, recognition. The weight stretched. Outside, blue lights approached, reflecting off the fuselage in slow pulses. Inside, the cabin aged 10 years in 5 minutes. People shifted, cleared throats. A man muttered about meetings. A woman clasped her purse tighter. Evelyn sat rigid, hands folded now, posture immaculate. In her mind, the narrative scrambled. This was supposed to be a correction, a reminder of order. Instead, it felt like a trial she hadn't prepared for. The officers boarded quietly. 2 men, dark uniforms. No rush. One of them glanced at Marcus, then at the wet carpet, then at Evelyn. They had done this dance before. They knew where it usually ended. Harris spoke to them in low tones. Names, seats, summary. He didn't embellish. He didn't soften. "Ma'am," one officer said to Evelyn, "we're going to need you to step off the aircraft." Her head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Just to take a statement." She stood too fast. "This is absurd. I haven't done anything." The officer didn't argue. He waited. As she passed Marcus, she leaned in, her voice a whisper, sharpened by fear. You did this. Marcus looked up at her. Really looked. His eyes were steady, but there was something else now. Not anger, not triumph. Certainty. I didn't, he said quietly. You did. The officer placed a hand near her elbow, not gripping, guiding. Evelyn stiffened but moved. Pride could only hold so long against procedure. As she was escorted out, something unexpected happened. Applause didn't break out. No cheers, no satisfaction. Instead, the cabin went very still. People avoided looking at Marcus. Some out of shame, some out of confusion. Some because seeing him meant seeing themselves in the moment they hadn't spoken. Harris turned back to the cabin. We will be delayed. I appreciate your patience. Patience. Another word with weight. Marcus exhaled slowly. His shirt clung cold to his skin. He was aware now of the dampness, the discomfort, the eyes. He reached for his backpack instinctively, then stopped himself. Slow, deliberate. Sarah returned with a clean towel. She offered it without ceremony. Thank you, Marcus said. As he dried his hands, his phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He ignored it. Not yet. Outside, Evelyn stood under fluorescent lights, arms crossed, talking fast now, explaining herself to no one who seemed particularly interested. Her world had tilted. Not fallen. Not yet. Inside, the plane waited. Marcus sat back, towel folded neatly on his lap. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat found rhythm again. This wasn't over. He knew that. The system rarely finished what had started in one act. But it had paused. And sometimes, a pause was enough to change everything. The delay stretched past discomfort into something heavier, a slow pressure that settled into bones. The cabin lights dimmed another notch. Outside the window, the blue lights faded, replaced by the dull orange wash of the terminal. Time stopped behaving normally. Marcus sat alone in his seat, towel folded with care, jacket still damp at the cuff. He could feel the cold there now, a thin reminder that this wasn't over. Across the aisle, the empty seat where Evelyn Harper had been looked suddenly larger, like a missing tooth. People kept glancing at it, then away, as if the absence itself made them uneasy. Sarah moved quietly through the cabin, checking on passengers, answering questions without answering anything. Her voice stayed even, professional, but her shoulders were tight. She had seen incidents before. She had never seen one freeze a plane this completely. A man 2 rows back leaned into the aisle. Are we getting off or not? He asked, irritation leaking through the polish. Some of us have connections. Sarah met his eyes. The captain will update everyone shortly, sir. The man huffed and sat back, muttering about standard slipping. His wife touched his arm, a warning more than comfort. Marcus heard it all. He always did. His phone buzzed again, longer this time. He slipped it from his pocket and glanced down. No missed calls, just a single text notification. The name at the top, enough to tighten his chest. You okay? He didn't answer. Not yet. He locked the screen and slid the phone back, fingers lingering a second longer than necessary. Captain Harris returned to the cockpit and closed the door behind him. Inside, the air was tense but controlled. The first officer watched him carefully. They're taking her statement now, Harris said. Ground wants to know if we're deplaning first class. The first officer frowned. That'll turn into a mess. Harris nodded. Exactly. He stared at the instrument panel, eyes unfocused. He had made the right call. He knew that. Still, something about the kid in 2A nagged at him. Not fear, not suspicion. Something else. The way he held himself. The way he hadn't rushed to explain or defend or appeal. Most people, when accused, tried to shrink or fight. The boy had done neither. Harris picked up the interphone again. "Sarah, bring the passenger from 2A forward. Quietly." In the cabin, Sarah stopped beside Marcus's seat. She leaned in just enough to keep it private. "The captain would like to speak with you." Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his stomach. Authority always came with risk. Still, he nodded and stood, movements slow, deliberate. Eyes followed him as he walked up the aisle, some curious, some guarded. One woman offered a faint, apologetic smile. He didn't return it. The cockpit smelled like metal and coffee. Harris gestured to the jump seat. "Sit." Marcus did. Harris studied him in silence. Up close, the age difference was stark. The captain's hands were thick, scarred, steady. Marcus's were young, but controlled, fingers resting lightly on his knees. "Where are you headed?" Harris asked. "London," Marcus said. "Then Cambridge." Harris raised an eyebrow. "School?" "Yes, sir." "What kind?" Marcus hesitated, just a beat. "A program." Harris caught it. That wasn't the whole answer. Marcus met his gaze. "No, sir." Harris leaned back. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but I need to understand the situation I'm responsible for." Marcus took a breath. He chose his words with care. "I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to get where I was going." Harris nodded. "Most people do." He studied Marcus again, then looked down at the report Sarah had started. "You handled yourself well back there." Marcus didn't respond. "Most people wouldn't have," Harris continued, "especially at your age." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "I've had practice." That answer stayed with Harris longer than it should have. Outside, in a small interview room off the gate, Evelyn Harper sat rigid in a plastic chair. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Her handbag rested on the floor, unopened. She had stopped talking. Talking hadn't helped. An airport security supervisor flipped through notes. "So to be clear, ma'am, you initiated physical contact." "It was water," Evelyn said flatly. "Not a punch." "It doesn't matter." She laughed once, humorless. "It should." The supervisor didn't argue. He slid a form across the table. "We'll need you to sign this. You'll be released shortly." Evelyn stared at the paper. Release. As if she'd been held. As if she were the problem. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down. A message from her sister already. "What did you do?" Evelyn's fingers trembled. She didn't answer. Back on the plane, the cabin had shifted again. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by something closer to reflection. Conversations were quieter now, more careful. A man whispered that the world was changing too fast. A woman replied that maybe it had needed to. Marcus returned to his seat without fanfare. Sarah offered him a fresh jacket from crew storage. He declined, with a polite shake of his head. "I'm fine," he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "If you need anything." He didn't. Minutes later, Captain Harris's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are resolving the situation and expect to resume shortly." A ripple of restrained relief passed through the rows. Marcus finally checked his phone. 3 new messages now. Same sender. "Call me when you can." They stopped the plane. I'm watching the gate feed. His thumb hovered over the screen. He typed one word. Soon. He stared at it before sending, then pressed send and locked the phone away again. As the plane prepared to move once more, Marcus looked out the window. The terminal lights blurred together, reflections overlapping his own faint image in the glass. He looked young there, smaller than he felt. Around him, people settled back into their seats, convinced the worst was over, that the story had reached its end. Marcus knew better. The pause had only exposed the surface. What came next would reach deeper, into records and histories and decisions made long before this flight ever boarded. The engines began to rise again, slow and steady. And somewhere between the gate and the runway, the truth started to move with them. The aircraft rolled forward again, slow at first, like it was testing the ground beneath it. The engines climbed in pitch, steady and controlled, and the familiar choreography of departure resumed. Seatbacks upright, trays stowed, a routine trying to reassert itself after being shaken. But something had shifted. Everyone could feel it. The cabin was quieter now, not relaxed, but alert, like a room after a door had been slammed. Marcus kept his gaze forward as the plane turned toward the runway. The lights outside blurred into long streaks of white and amber. His reflection in the window looked thinner than he felt, a younger version of himself trapped in glass. He flexed his fingers once, then folded his hands again. Control mattered. It always did. Sarah passed through the aisle one more time, checking belts, offering practiced smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. When she reached Marcus, she paused. "We'll be airborne soon," she said softly. Not reassurance, information. He nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing." Marcus didn't answer. Right and wrong were luxuries he didn't trust in moments like this. Outcomes were what mattered. As the plane accelerated, the cabin pressed back into their seats. A woman closed her eyes. A man tightened his grip on the armrest. When the wheels lifted, there was a collective release of breath, subtle but shared. They were in the air now, committed. Applause didn't come. It never did in first class. Instead, there was the quiet rustle of jackets settling, glasses being adjusted, the return of small rituals. Menus opened. Screens flickered on. Normalcy, rehearsed and fragile. Marcus felt the vibration through the floor before the announcement came. Captain Harris's voice filled the cabin, calm and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are now en route to London. Flight time will be approximately 7 hours. If you witnessed or were affected by the earlier incident, a member of our crew may follow up after landing." Affected. The word carried weight without assigning blame. The seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin loosened slightly, but the tension didn't disappear. It redistributed. A man in the row ahead leaned back and glanced over his shoulder at Marcus. His expression was unreadable. Curiosity edged with something else. He turned away without speaking. Across the aisle, the empty seat remained. A flight attendant placed a folded blanket on it, as if trying to erase the absence. It didn't work. Marcus reached down and adjusted his backpack with his foot, careful not to draw attention. Inside were papers, neatly organized, notebooks, a slim laptop. Nothing flashy, everything essential. He checked the zipper by touch alone. Closed. A voice cut through the low murmur. "Kid." Marcus looked up. The man had turned fully now, late 50s, maybe early 60s, gray hair, expensive but worn jacket. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "You handled yourself well back there," the man said. His tone wasn't kind or cruel. It was evaluative, like a hiring manager. Marcus considered his response. "I didn't do anything." The man nodded slowly. "Exactly." He turned back to his seat, conversation over. Marcus felt his pulse tick faster for a moment, then settle. People noticed more than they admitted. They always had. Service resumed. Drinks were offered, trays unfolded. The rituals returned in fragments. Sarah brought Marcus a glass of water, set it down carefully, met his eyes for half a second longer than required. "Let me know if you need anything," she said. "I will," Marcus replied. He didn't mean it. He never needed anything he couldn't handle himself. As the plane leveled off, Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Images rose unbidden. His mother at the kitchen table, bills spread out, telling him to keep his head down. His grandfather's voice, slower, steadier, reminding him that dignity wasn't something anyone could take unless you handed it over. Across the Atlantic, night stretched endless and dark. Somewhere below, cities glowed like scattered embers. In the cockpit, Captain Harris sat back and removed his cap, rubbing a hand over his hair. The first officer glanced at him. "You good?" Harris nodded. "Yeah, just thinking. About the incident." "About the kid," Harris said. "Something about him." The first officer shrugged. Quiet ones are always the ones to watch. Harris almost smiled. Almost. Back in the cabin, Marcus's phone buzzed again. He waited this time, counted 3 breaths, then another. Finally, he slipped it out and read the message. "They let her go. She's furious. Media's sniffing already." Marcus closed his eyes. He typed carefully. "Keep it contained. No statements. Not yet." The reply came fast. "Understood. Call when ready." Marcus locked the screen. His jaw tightened. The world beyond the cabin was already moving, already reacting. He had hoped for more time. He rarely got it. A woman 2 rows back whispered to her companion, her voice carrying just enough. "I can't believe people still act like that." Her companion replied, "I can. I just didn't think I'd see it here." Marcus listened without turning. Hearing was safer than looking. Minutes passed. Then more. The cabin settled into the long middle stretch of flight, where hours blurred together and vigilance dulled. Some passengers slept. Others worked. A few stared at screens without seeing them. Marcus remained awake. He watched reflections shift in the window as the plane cut through darkness. His mind stayed sharp, running through contingencies. What would happen when they landed? Who would ask questions? Who would pretend not to notice? The captain's words echoed again, uninvited. "A member of our crew may follow up." Follow up meant paperwork, statements, names. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had expected scrutiny. He hadn't expected the stop, the pause, the eyes. Power, he had learned, didn't announce itself. It waited. It observed. It let others reveal themselves first. A flight attendant stopped beside his seat again, this time with a gentle smile that felt practiced but sincere. "Dinner will be served shortly," she said. "Thank you," Marcus replied. As she moved on, the man across the aisle shifted, glancing once more at the empty seat. His lips pressed together, thoughtful. The plane flew on, smooth and relentless. Somewhere behind them, in a brightly lit terminal room, Evelyn Harper sat alone, staring at her phone, watching her own name begin to surface in places she didn't recognize. Notifications stacked, messages she didn't open. Her certainty cracked, just slightly. Somewhere ahead, Marcus Reed stared into the dark and planned his next move. The night outside offered no answers, only distance. And the distance was closing fast. By the time the cabin lights dimmed to their nighttime glow, the story had already begun to leak out of the airplane. Marcus felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air. The subtle change in how people glanced at their phones, then at him, then away again. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. Or the early stages of it. He had seen this pattern before, always starting small, always pretending to be nothing. His phone buzzed again, longer this time. He didn't pick it up right away. He waited until the seatbelt sign flickered on briefly as the plane hit a pocket of light turbulence. The hum of the engines deepened. A few passengers stirred. The moment felt right. He unlocked the screen. It was not a message. It was a link. A grainy video clip, shaky, clearly filmed from several rows back. Audio muffled, but unmistakable. Evelyn's voice cut through, sharp and certain. "Are you sure you belong here?" The splash of water followed. A collective gasp. Then silence. Below it, a caption already forming its own life. First-class incident on flight to London. Kid stays calm, woman loses it. The view count was climbing in real time. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. Just long enough to acknowledge it. Not long enough to let it take him. Across the aisle, the man in the worn jacket noticed Marcus's stillness, the faint tightening around his eyes. He leaned slightly toward the empty seat, then back again, as if debating something. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't post that," the man said quietly. Marcus looked at him. "No, sir." The man nodded. "Good." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. The man exhaled through his nose. "Now people decide who you are without asking." Marcus absorbed that. It wasn't new, just earlier than planned. Dinner service came and went. Marcus barely touched his tray. He wasn't hungry. Hunger was a distraction he had trained himself to ignore when things mattered. Around him, forks clinked softly. Wine was poured. Conversations resumed in careful fragments. Normal life, trying to continue. Sarah stopped by again, her voice low. "There's already chatter," she said. "The captain knows." Marcus met her gaze. "I expected that." She studied him, really studied him now. "You seem prepared." He considered the word. "I try to be." In the cockpit, Captain Harris listened as the first officer read aloud snippets from the flight operations channel. Reports of a video circulating, requests from corporate, a note from legal advising documentation upon landing. Harris rubbed his temple. Of course, it's already out there. The first officer glanced back at the cabin through the reinforced door. "You think the kid planned this?" Harris shook his head. "No. If he had, it would have gone differently." Meaning he wouldn't have been so quiet. Back in first class, a woman 2 rows behind Marcus leaned toward her companion. "They're saying he's some kind of student prodigy." Her companion replied, "They say a lot of things." Marcus heard the words prodigy and ignored them. Labels were tools, useful only to people who didn't understand the work underneath. His phone buzzed again. A call this time. He let it ring once, twice, then answered, holding it low, voice barely above the engine hum. "Yes?" A man's voice came through, controlled, efficient. "Marcus, we need to talk." "Not now," Marcus said. A pause. Then, "You're airborne." "Yes." Another pause, heavier. Then, "Listen carefully. We're monitoring everything. Media inquiries are coming in. No statements, no posts, no reactions." "I know." "Good," the voice said. "Because if they dig far enough, they'll find the rest." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Let them." "Marcus," the voice warned, not angry, just concerned. This wasn't how it was supposed to surface. "I didn't choose the timing," Marcus replied, "but I can control what happens next." Silence on the line. Then, quieter. "Just be careful." The call ended. Marcus stared at the dark screen. His reflection stared back, fractured by the curve of the glass. He looked young. He knew that worked against him. It always had. People expected anger from young men like him, or fear, or desperation. They never expected patience. Across the aisle, the empty seat seemed to accuse the cabin, a reminder of what had happened, of who had been removed and who remained. Somewhere behind them, Evelyn Harper sat in her apartment, watching the same clip on a larger screen, sound turned off. Her own face flashed briefly in the reflection of the glass, of the captain's voice, of the fact that the system, for once, had stopped and looked. Most systems didn't. A hand appeared in his peripheral vision, Sarah offering a cup of tea this time. He accepted it, wrapping his fingers around the warmth. "Thank you," he said. She hesitated. "Whatever happens after we land," she said softly, "you handled yourself with dignity." Marcus met her eyes. "So did you." She smiled, tired but real, then moved on. The lights dimmed further, screens shut off. One by one, passengers drifted towards sleep, or the illusion of it. The cabin settled into the long, dark stretch of flight. Marcus stayed awake. He knew the next act wouldn't happen in the air. It would happen when the doors opened, when questions were asked, when people decided whether he was a symbol or a threat. The engines carried them east, relentless, unbothered by human noise. Marcus Reed sat very still in seat 2A, eyes open, mind sharp, waiting for the ground to rise up and meet him. Because when it did, the story would no longer belong to the plane. It would belong to everyone watching. The wheels touched down just after dawn, not with drama, but with a long, deliberate sigh. Rubber meeting runway, as if the aircraft itself had been holding tension in its frame. The cabin shifted forward, bodies leaning, reality reasserting itself. London waited on the other side of the windows, grey and patient, unaware of how many private reckonings had crossed the Atlantic inside one metal tube. Marcus opened his eyes before the reverse thrust finished. He had not slept. His mind had stayed too alert, tracking possibilities, rehearsing conversations that might never happen. He straightened his jacket, still faintly marked where the water had soaked through hours earlier. The stain was lighter now, almost invisible, but he knew where it was. Some marks didn't need to show. Around him, first class woke slowly. Screens flickered on. Phones reappeared. A man checked headlines, his brow furrowing. A woman gasped softly and angled her phone away, then back again, as if confirming what she was seeing. Whispers traveled faster now, less cautious than before. Sarah's voice came over the intercom, calm, but edged with fatigue. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Local authorities may board briefly to complete follow-up procedures." Local authorities. Follow-up. The words landed unevenly. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, anticipation. This was the part no one filmed. No captions, no comments. Just rooms, questions, decisions. The seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin stirred, then stopped again as uniformed figures appeared at the front. 2 airport officials. Not aggressive, not rushed. Clipboards in hand, eyes scanning faces with professional neutrality. Captain Harris stepped out of the cockpit once more. He looked older now, lines deeper around his eyes, the night etched into him. He addressed the officials quietly, then turned back to the cabin. "We'll be deplaning shortly," he said. "One passenger will be asked to remain seated for a brief conversation. Everyone else may exit as normal." Eyes shifted, some curious, some relieved it wasn't them. Marcus stayed seated. Sarah stopped beside him, her voice low. "They'll want a statement for their records. You're not in trouble." "I know," Marcus said. She hesitated. "Still." He nodded. "Still." Passengers filed past, some stealing glances, others deliberately not looking. The man in the worn jacket paused as he reached Marcus's row. He didn't speak. He simply nodded once. Not approval. Acknowledgement. When the cabin finally emptied, the quiet felt cavernous. The officials approached. One of them, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a clipped accent, smiled politely. "Mr. Reed," she said, checking her notes. "We just need a few minutes." They spoke there, in the open cabin. Dates, times, what was said, what wasn't. Marcus answered calmly, precisely. He did not embellish, he did not speculate. He stuck to what he knew. The woman nodded, writing quickly. "You handled yourself well." Marcus shrugged slightly. "I didn't have much choice." She looked at him for a moment longer than necessary, then closed her folder. "You're free to go. Enjoy your stay." Enjoy. The word felt distant. As Marcus stepped onto the jet bridge, his phone vibrated violently in his pocket. He ignored it until he reached the terminal. Then he stopped, leaned against the cool glass wall, and checked the screen. His name was everywhere now. Not fully explained, not fully wrong. Headlines blurred together. First-class incident. Calm teen. Racial tension at 30,000 feet. Some praised him. Some questioned him. Some asked why he hadn't spoken up sooner, louder, angrier. He exhaled slowly. A call came through immediately. He answered. "They're already spinning it," the voice said. Same voice from the air, controlled, familiar. "We've managed to keep your background out of the first wave. For now," Marcus replied. "Yes," the voice agreed. "For now." "I'm not hiding," Marcus said. "I know," the voice said. "But timing matters." Marcus closed his eyes. The terminal buzzed around him, wheels rolling, announcements echoing, life continuing at its relentless pace. "They wanted a symbol," Marcus said quietly. "They got one." "Not the one they expected," the voice replied. The call ended. Outside, London pressed against the glass. Rain threatened, but hadn't committed yet. Marcus moved through customs without issue, his face not yet familiar enough to stop him. That would change. He knew that too. As he exited into arrivals, a small knot of people stood near the barrier, phones raised, whispers. A camera lens caught the light. Marcus adjusted his jacket and kept walking. "Marcus!" someone called. "Do you want to comment?" He didn't stop. Not out of fear, out of choice. A black sedan waited at the curb. The driver stepped out, opening the door without speaking. Marcus slid into the back seat, the door closing with a muted thud that cut off the noise. As the car pulled away, his phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. "You embarrassed her. You should have just moved." Marcus stared at the words. He didn't delete them. He didn't respond. He locked the phone and set it face down on the seat beside him. Across an ocean, in a quiet apartment still half dark, Evelyn Harper sat at her kitchen table, coffee untouched. The television murmured in the background. Her name appeared briefly on the screen, then disappeared again beneath expert commentary. She watched, arms folded, jaw tight. Her phone lay face up beside the mug. Missed calls, messages she hadn't opened. A voicemail from her former assistant, polite and distant. She replayed the moment again in her mind. The look on the boy's face. Calm, controlled, as if he had known something she didn't. For the first time, a thin thread of doubt slipped through her certainty. Back in the car, Marcus leaned his head against the window as the city slid past. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't triumphant. He felt tired. Older than 19. Older than he should have been. The driver spoke for the first time. "Rough flight." Marcus considered the question. "Eventful," he said. The driver nodded, satisfied. As they crossed the river, Marcus watched the grey water churn below. He thought of the pause on the tarmac, of the stop that had forced people to look. He knew it wouldn't happen every time. He knew systems rarely changed because of one incident. But sometimes, they cracked. And when they did, what spilled out mattered. Marcus Reed straightened in his seat as the car turned toward the city centre. Whatever waited next would not be quiet. It would not be controlled by him alone.
But he would meet it the same way he had met everything else. Still, awake, ready. The story had left the airplane behind. Now it belonged to the ground. The city didn't slow down for Marcus Reed. London never did. Traffic surged, horns snapped, buses hissed at curbs, and people poured out of stations with the same practiced impatience they'd carried for decades. History lived here, but it never waited. The car slid through it all like a blade through fabric. Smooth, silent, deliberate. Marcus watched the streets without really seeing them. His phone lay face down beside him, vibrating every few minutes like a nervous animal. He didn't touch it. Touching it meant choosing a version of the story, and he wasn't ready to give anyone that power yet. The sedan turned into a quieter street, lined with stone buildings that carried their age with dignity. No glass towers, no neon. Old money architecture. The kind that had survived wars by knowing when not to stand out. The driver stopped in front of a modest entrance with no signage. Marcus recognized the place immediately. "Here," the driver said. Marcus stepped out. The air smelled like rain and exhaust, and something metallic beneath it all. The building didn't announce itself. It didn't need to. He passed through the doors and into a lobby that felt insulated from time. Wood paneling, soft lighting. A desk staffed by a man who didn't ask his name. "You're expected," the man said, already reaching for a phone. Marcus nodded and followed him down a corridor that muted sound with every step. Somewhere above them, floors creaked faintly. Lives layered on lives. Decisions made in rooms like this had a way of echoing long after the people who made them were gone. They stopped at a door. The man knocked once, then opened it. Inside, 3 people waited. The first was a woman in her early 50s, sharp eyes, grey streaking her hair with intention rather than age. She rose as Marcus entered. "You made it," she said. The second was a man Marcus recognized immediately. He had seen his face on panels, in trade publications, quoted in articles about infrastructure reform and labor ethics. Late 60s, calm, controlled, the kind of presence that didn't lean forward to be heard. The third sat in the shadows near the window, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Marcus closed the door behind him. "Sit," the older man said, gesturing to a chair opposite him. Marcus did. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, rain finally committed, tapping softly against the glass. The silence wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. "You understand why you're here?" the woman said. "Yes," Marcus replied. "And you understand," the older man added. "But what happened on that plane was not supposed to happen that way." Marcus met his gaze. "I understand it wasn't planned." "Planned," the man repeated softly. An interesting word. Marcus didn't bite. The woman folded her hands. "The video is everywhere. The narrative is forming faster than we can slow it down." "I didn't ask for it," Marcus said. "No," she agreed. "But you triggered it." The word hung between them. Triggered. As if existence itself were an act. The man in the shadows finally leaned forward, light catching his face. He was younger than the others, early 40s maybe. His eyes were sharp, amused, measuring. "You ever notice," he said, "how people say the system is broken right up until the moment it works for someone they didn't expect?" Marcus looked at him. "The system paused," he said. "That's not the same as working." The man smiled slightly. "That's why you're here." The older man leaned back. "Marcus, you have something people don't see at first glance. Not money, not connections. Leverage." Marcus felt the words settle in his chest. Heavy, familiar. And now, the man continued, you also have attention. I don't want it, Marcus said. That, the woman replied, is precisely why it's dangerous. She stood and crossed to the window, rain streaking the glass like blurred lines on a map. People are already digging. Old photos, school records, family history. They don't know what they're looking for yet, but they will. Marcus shifted slightly. Let them. The older man's voice hardened. No, you don't understand what let them means. Marcus held his gaze. I do. Another silence. He could feel it now, the pressure beneath the calm. This wasn't a rescue meeting. It wasn't a strategy session to protect him. It was a risk assessment. You were supposed to arrive quietly, the woman said. Attend your meetings, shake hands, build credibility over time. I still will, Marcus replied. Not like this. Not fear. Recognition. Evelyn Harper, the man said, is not just a woman who lost her temper on a plane. Marcus said nothing. She sits on boards, the woman added, advisory councils, committees that decide which companies get contracts and which don't. She's been quietly shaping outcomes for years. Marcus looked at them. Then why was she allowed to behave like that? The man in the shadows answered softly. Because no one ever stopped her. A beat passed. You did, he added. The rain outside intensified. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were listening. This isn't about revenge, the older man said. It's about exposure. And timing. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You want me to stay quiet? For now, the woman said. And later, the older man's eyes didn't waver. Later you'll speak, but not as a victim. Marcus's fingers tightened against the armrest. As what? The man in the shadows smiled again, this time without humor. As someone they underestimated. Marcus sat back. He could feel the weight of it now, the machinery beginning to turn behind the scenes. Not justice, not yet. Something colder, more precise. What if I say no? Marcus asked. The woman turned from the window. Then this story eats you alive. It becomes about your age, your tone, your silence, your anger, or your lack of it. And if I say yes? The older man stood. When he did, the room seemed to recalibrate around him. Then you let us handle the noise, while you prepare for what comes after. Marcus met his gaze. Which is? The man took a step closer. The reveal. The word landed like a closed door. Marcus didn't ask what kind. He already knew it wouldn't be small. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving the city washed and reflective. Inside, Marcus Reed sat very still, 19 years old, carrying more than anyone in the room had expected him to. He thought of the pause on the tarmac, of the moment the plane stopped because someone finally said enough. This was bigger than that. This was about who got to decide when things stopped and when they moved again. Marcus nodded once. Tell me what you need. The older man allowed himself a thin smile. Patience, he said, and silence. Marcus rose from the chair, posture straight, eyes clear. He had come across an ocean to attend meetings. He was leaving this room with a different kind of appointment, one that would change far more than a single flight ever could. And it was coming faster than anyone realized. The room cleared without ceremony. No handshakes, no reassurances. Just doors opening and closing with quiet finality. Marcus stepped back into the corridor alone, the weight of what had been said settling slowly, deliberately. Not panic, not excitement. Something colder. Purpose taking shape. The man at the front desk didn't look up as Marcus passed. He didn't need to. People like Marcus were not remembered by faces here. They were remembered by outcomes. Outside, the rain had thinned into a grey mist that clung to the pavement. The city felt subdued, like it was waiting. Marcus walked without a destination for several blocks, letting the motion ground him. The sound of his shoes against stone, the hiss of tires on wet streets, the low murmur of voices drifting out of cafes that had already moved on from whatever story was trending online. His phone vibrated again. This time he picked it up. A message from an unknown number. No greeting, no signature. You are being framed as a story about manners. That is not what this is. Marcus stared at the words, then typed back. What is it then? The reply came slower. It is about power being exposed by accident. Marcus slipped the phone into his pocket. He didn't need more explanation. He could feel it now, the way people had shifted around him on the plane, the way the room upstairs had measured him not as a teenager, but as a variable, a disruption. He turned a corner and stopped short. Across the street, two people stood near a black car. A man with a camera slung low, a woman with a phone already raised. They weren't aggressive. They didn't rush him. They simply watched, waiting to see if he would confirm what they suspected. Marcus kept walking. "Marcus," the woman called. "Just a quick question." He didn't respond. Behind him, the man muttered something about arrogance, about kids thinking they were untouchable. Marcus heard it all. He always did. By the time he reached the hotel, the lobby television was already playing the footage on a loop. No sound, just images. Evelyn's rigid posture, the water mid-air, Marcus sitting still. A caption scrawled beneath it. Incident sparks debate over decorum and entitlement in first-class travel. Marcus paused. Decorum. Entitlement. Safe words. Words that made the story smaller than it was. He took the elevator up and let the doors close on the noise. Inside his room, the quiet hit him all at once. He sat on the edge of the bed and finally let his shoulders drop. Just a little. Enough to acknowledge the strain. Enough to reset. His phone buzzed again. Same number as before. They will try to make you speak too early. Marcus typed back. I won't. A pause. Then, good, because tomorrow changes everything. He set the phone down and stared at the wall. Tomorrow had always mattered. He had planned for it for years. Just not like this. Across the city, Evelyn Harper sat in a glass office overlooking the Thames, the skyline reflecting off the surface like a distorted mirror. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not today. But she had needed the space, the height, the reminder of who she was before a flight attendant and a teenager had upended her sense of control. Her assistant stood near the door, hands clasped. The board wants a call, she said carefully. Evelyn didn't turn. Which board? All of them. Evelyn closed her eyes. Tell them I'll respond in writing. The assistant hesitated. They're concerned. Evelyn laughed softly. Of course they are. She turned then, her expression sharp but frayed at the edges. Do they think I've never handled controversy? The assistant didn't answer. Silence was safer. Evelyn walked back to her desk and opened her laptop. Emails stacked like accusations, requests for comment, invitations rescinded, meetings postponed. Language softened in ways she recognized immediately. She clicked open the video again, watched it without sound, focused on Marcus's face. He hadn't flinched. That detail unsettled her more than the water, more than the stop, more than the officers. He hadn't played the role she expected. No fear, no anger, no pleading. People who didn't flinch usually knew something you didn't. Back at the hotel, Marcus lay awake as night settled over the city. His mind replayed the meeting upstairs, the word reveal echoing again and again. Not yet. Soon. He thought of his mother, still asleep back home, unaware that her son's name was being debated by strangers. He thought of his grandfather's stories about doors that only opened when enough pressure was applied in the right place. This was pressure. His phone buzzed one last time before he slept. Tomorrow at 10. Be ready. No explanation, no address. Marcus turned the phone face down and finally closed his eyes. Morning came fast. The city woke with purpose. Marcus dressed carefully, choosing nothing that would distract. Neutral colors, clean lines. He checked his reflection once, then once more. Not vanity, calibration. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed. Journalists pretended to check out. Guests pretended not to stare. Marcus moved through them like a current, neither resisting nor yielding. Outside, a familiar black car waited. The driver didn't ask his name. They drove in silence. The building they stopped at was unremarkable from the outside. Brick, narrow windows. A brass plaque with lettering worn smooth by time. Inside, the air was cooler, quieter. The kind of quiet that came from insulation, not absence. Marcus was led into a room with no windows and a long table. 3 chairs, one already occupied. The man looked up as Marcus entered. He stood, tall, graying hair, calm eyes that missed nothing. "Marcus Reed," he said. "We've been waiting." Marcus took the seat opposite him. "For what?" The man folded his hands. For the moment when pretending this was small stopped being an option. Marcus leaned back slightly. "And now?" The man smiled, thin and controlled. "Now we see who actually boarded that plane." Marcus felt it then. The shift. The line between being discussed and being known. "Your age," the man continued, "has been very convenient for people. It lets them dismiss you, minimize you. That ends today." Marcus's pulse quickened, but his face remained still. "You're not just a student," the man said. "You're not just a symbol." He slid a folder across the table. "Your leverage." Marcus didn't open it. Not yet. Outside the room, unseen but very real, systems adjusted, timelines accelerated, narratives sharpened. The pause that had begun on a runway was about to ripple outward. And this time, it would not be quiet. Marcus did not reach for the folder. He had learned long ago that the first move people expected from someone young was eagerness. The second was fear. He gave them neither. He sat back, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady, and let the silence stretch until the man across from him shifted almost imperceptibly. "You're wondering why now," the man said. His accent was American, softened by years of working in rooms where geography mattered less than influence. Why a flight? Why a cup of water? Why this moment? "I'm wondering who benefits," Marcus replied. The man smiled. Not wide, not warm. "Good." He tapped the folder once with his finger. Inside is everything that was never meant to exist in one place. Board votes that never made the minutes. Procurement decisions that favored the same firms again and again. Advisory memos, written in language careful enough to avoid liability and sharp enough to kill competition. Marcus finally leaned forward, but he still didn't open it. "Evelyn Harper." "She's a node," the man corrected. "Not the center. Just a visible pressure point." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. He had expected denial. He hadn't expected scale. "You stopped a plane," the man continued. "That doesn't happen unless someone with authority decides order has been violated. That pause was recorded, logged, reviewed. It triggered internal flags that haven't been raised in years. Marcus remembered the silence on the tarmac, the way even the engines seemed to wait. "They think this is about race," Marcus said. "They hope it is," the man replied. "Because race can be debated, argued, diluted. What they don't want discussed is access." Marcus's fingers curled once against his knee. Access to what? "Movement," the man said. "Who moves freely, who gets waved through, who gets stopped and questioned and asked to justify their presence." He leaned forward now, voice lowering. Evelyn Harper believed the cabin was hers because the system had always behaved as if it was. And when it didn't, Marcus said quietly, she panicked. The man nodded. Exactly. A knock came at the door, soft, controlled. A woman stepped in, late 40s, hair pulled back, eyes alert. She placed a tablet on the table without speaking, then left. The man turned the screen toward Marcus. News feeds, headlines shifting in real time, the language evolving. Less about decorum now, more about influence, about boards, about oversight. "They're adjusting," Marcus said. "They always do," the man replied. "The question is whether they adjust fast enough." Marcus finally opened the folder. The documents inside were dense. Names he recognized from headlines, others he didn't. Connections drawn not with lines, but with timing. Who met whom? Who stopped meeting whom after certain votes? Patterns that only appeared when you stopped looking at individuals and started looking at flow. "This is bigger than me," Marcus said. The man's expression softened slightly. "It always is. That's why individuals matter." Marcus looked up. "So what do you want from me?" The man didn't answer right away. He stood and walked to the wall, where a single framed photograph hung. An airport terminal from decades ago. Men in suits, women in dresses, everyone the same color. "We want you to wait," he said finally, "long enough for the system to reveal itself. And then, the man said, turning back, you speak. Not about what happened to you, about what almost happened to everyone else." Marcus closed the folder. He felt the weight of it now, not in his hands, but in his chest. This wasn't protection. It wasn't strategy. It was positioning. "You know I'm 19, Marcus said. The man met his gaze without flinching. "You know how old most systems are." Marcus stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor. The sound felt louder than it should have. "If I do this," Marcus said, "people will try to tear me apart." "Yes," the man said simply. "They'll look at my family." "Yes." "They'll say I'm being used." "Yes." Marcus nodded once. "They won't be wrong." The man's smile returned, thin and approving. "No. But they won't be right either." Marcus picked up the folder and tucked it under his arm. He felt taller standing now, not because he had grown, but because the room had shrunk. Outside, the hallway seemed narrower than before, the air heavier. Every step felt measured. As he exited the building, the city greeted him with its usual indifference. Traffic, voices, life continuing without waiting for permission. His phone buzzed as he reached the curb. A message from a blocked number. "You have one chance to define yourself. After that, others will do it for you." Marcus stared at the screen, then slipped the phone back into his pocket without replying. Across the Atlantic, in a quiet conference room with blinds drawn tight, Evelyn Harper sat at the far end of a long table. Faces she had known for years avoided her eyes. Papers lay neatly stacked in front of them, already marked, already decided. "This is temporary," she said, her voice too sharp for the room. We're overreacting." No one responded. The silence felt familiar now. Too familiar. Back in London, Marcus walked until the sound of traffic faded into something distant. He stopped at a bridge overlooking the river and rested his hands on the cold stone railing. The water below moved steadily, indifferent to narratives, to outrage, to delay. He thought of the plane again, the moment it stopped, the way power had paused because someone had forced it to look at itself. He exhaled slowly. He wasn't ready to speak yet. That was fine. But when he did, it wouldn't be about a seat or a splash of water. It would be about why some people believed they owned the sky, and why that belief was finally being questioned. The first headline broke before Marcus finished his coffee. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It didn't accuse. That was how he knew it mattered. The language was careful, precise, written by someone who understood that credibility moved slower than outrage, but lasted longer. Procurement Oversight Review triggered after airline incident. Names followed. Not Evelyn's first, not his. Others, older, heavier, people who didn't trend. Marcus read it once, then again, then set the phone face down on the table. Outside the cafe window, London moved the way it always had, indifferent to revelations, loyal only to momentum. Buses rolled past. Pedestrians argued with crosswalk lights. Somewhere, a church bell rang without urgency. Systems never collapsed all at once. They shifted. They realigned. They pretended nothing had changed until it was too late to pretend anymore. By mid-morning, Evelyn Harper's name surfaced again, this time without video, without drama. Suspended pending review. Advisory roles relinquished voluntarily. Language so polite it bordered on surgical. Marcus imagined her reading it alone, recognizing the tone immediately. This was not punishment. This was containment. He received the call just after noon. Same voice, same restraint. "You should see this." "I have," Marcus said. A pause. "They're moving faster than expected." "They were ready," Marcus replied. "Yes," the voice agreed. They were. The meeting that followed took place in a room that smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. No windows, no cameras. Just people who had learned to sit still while outcomes took shape around them. Marcus listened more than he spoke. He watched expressions change when certain names were mentioned. He noted who leaned back, who leaned forward, who stopped taking notes altogether. When it ended, no one congratulated him. No one thanked him. They didn't need to. This wasn't a victory. It was an opening. Outside, reporters waited. Not many. Not yet. Marcus exited through a side door and walked instead of taking the car. He wanted the city under his feet. He wanted the noise. He wanted to feel unimportant for just a few more blocks. His phone buzzed again. A message from a number he recognized now, though he had never saved it. It's time. Marcus stopped walking. The venue wasn't grand. It wasn't meant to be. A university auditorium. Wood paneling worn smooth by generations of elbows and ambition. The kind of place where ideas were supposed to matter more than people. The audience gathered quietly, not because they were told to, but because they sensed something different was happening. Marcus stood behind the curtain and listened to the murmur. His heart rate was steady, not calm, focused. He thought of the pause on the runway, of the moment everything stopped because one man with authority decided it had to. This was not that. This was slower, heavier. When he stepped into the light, the room settled. Not applause, attention. He spoke without notes. He spoke without anger. He spoke as someone who understood that emotion was loud, but clarity carried farther. He did not describe the water. He did not repeat the insult. He did not ask for sympathy. He spoke about access, about movement,
about how systems learned to recognize certain people as normal and others as interruptions. He spoke about how order was often just familiarity wearing a uniform. He spoke briefly. He stopped before they wanted him to. That was intentional. When he left the stage, the room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Then it exhaled. The fallout did not come all at once. It never did. Contracts were reviewed. Committees restructured. People resigned for personal reasons. Statements were issued that meant nothing and everything, depending on who was reading them. Marcus returned to his program. He studied. He worked. He kept his head down when it mattered and lifted it when it counted. Evelyn Harper did not disappear. She adjusted. She gave one interview. It did not go well. She spoke about misunderstanding, about generational differences, about being taken out of context. She did not mention Marcus's name. She did not need to. Everyone knew who had stopped the plane. Months later, Marcus boarded another flight. Different airline, different city. He took his seat without incident. No one questioned him. No one stared. The absence of tension felt almost surreal. Progress rarely announced itself. It just stopped needing to fight so hard. As the plane climbed, Marcus watched the city fall away beneath the clouds. He did not feel triumphant. He felt responsible. Those were not the same thing. Power, he had learned, was not about control. It was about interruption. About knowing when to stop something long enough for everyone else to notice it had been moving in the wrong direction. The seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin relaxed. Someone laughed softly. Somewhere behind him, a conversation started about weather, about schedules, about nothing at all. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and let the sound of the engines settle into something steady. The story was no longer his. It never really had been. It belonged to the space between people and the systems they trusted to move them safely forward. And sometimes, it belonged to the pause. If this story made you stop and think, like, subscribe, comment your thoughts.